Good evening, everyone. I'm Dave Holden, and with me is Dalton Grimes, and we have got a special treat for you tonight.
Yes, so this episode is especially special because it is
I
our...
see what you're doing there.
Oh, well, thank you. It is our first, to my knowledge, viewer-submitted topic. So...
Oh, wow. I didn't
Yeah.
actually realize that somebody else had suggested that.
Yeah,
that's props to being a person who put that out for us. Who was it, Dalton?
Yes, we care about you. It was my friend Nick.
All right.
We were having a discussion on last known information, which you may be here to learn a little bit about.
Yeah.
And I was trying to describe why things like ether vial work differently than when a creature enters the battlefield and fights something. And to be completely honest, I didn't know... I didn't have the ability to check the comprehensive rules with me, and I looked at him and I was like, it's because it does. And to be fair, I would have looked it up had I the ability to at the time, but yeah, so I got that in, and I thought, this would be a great...
Yeah, absolutely.
This would be a great thing to cover.
So I don't know if you noticed this, Dalton, but this book here has been lying on the desk next to us. Topics and Number Theory by William Levesque.
Volumes 1 and 2.
Yeah, both volumes. Volume 2 actually had some really great stuff in it. But the reason that I have this out here today is Volume 1. There's a quote from the author that I think was actually extremely good and something. So I thought I'd share this with
David, are you trying to educate people about math?
No, don't worry. This is relevant to our thing, I promise. So first, a psychological remark. If we're presented with a rather large number of theorems bearing on the same subject but proved by quite diverse means, the natural tendency is to regard the techniques used in the various proofs as special tricks, each applicable only to the theorem with which it's associated. A technique ceases to be a trick and becomes a method only when it's been encountered enough times to seem natural. Correspondingly, a subject may be regarded as a bag of tricks if the relative number of techniques to results is too high. Unfortunately, an elementary number theory has sometimes been regarded as such a subject. In another type of subject, I think, would be this one here, the one we're talking about, last known information. Certainly, when I go through and I approach these questions, I wrote a number of questions for this one tonight, and when I went through and I noted them, it seemed like methods to me and not tricks. But certainly I could see how somebody else who wasn't like immersed in this kind of stuff all the time could definitely regard this as tricks instead of methods. So that's what we're going to try and do. We're going to try and make it so that the last known information topic becomes something that is more of the method type rather than the trick type, and hopefully the examples I prepared tonight will kind of shed some light on that. So
yeah, when I was talking to my friend about this, I was thinking to myself, okay, what's a good rule of thumb that I can give? What's something that I can tell them that would be really, more or less simple to process? And I really couldn't come up with anything.
Yep.
It's a very specific topic with good reason. There's
sort of.
Yeah.
I mean, this is one of those ones where the rules are complicated due to the fact that they have to be in order to make stuff work the way you think it should work.
Yes.
So that's basically how it works.
Yeah. A lot of it is pretty easy to put into action, but significantly harder to describe why.
So let's take a look at some of this stuff, shall we? So the first thing that I wanted to do is go through all the different spots in the CR where it specifically references last known information.
There are 4.
There's more than that, but they're like kind of grouped together. There's 13 matches when we hit the Control F button here. So we'll just go through them all time by time. So,
my app. When I typed in last known information, it brought me to 4 specific points.
Yeah, well, there's
CR.
like certain times where it says it twice in like a short span, so that would make sense.
Okay, so our first is 112.7a.
So once activated or triggered, an ability exists on the stack independently of its source. Destruction or removal of the source after that time won't affect the ability. So that in itself is actually really interesting. So if you wanted to think about something like, for example, the card that I prepared for our talking about it, well, there are several ones, but like if you wanted to talk about like a specific card like Thornwind Fairies, for example, so like with the Thornwind Fairies, it tap, deal 1 damage to target creature or player. Now that's interesting because like what this rule is saying is that even if Thornwind Fairies somehow dies before this happens, Thornwind Fairies can still deal 1 damage to target creature or player, which is not what you might expect. So we'll keep reading to where it says there. Note that some abilities cause a source to do something. In these cases, rather than the ability doing anything directly. In these cases, any activated or triggered ability that references information about the source because the effect needs to be divided checks that information when the ability is put on the stack. Otherwise, it will check when the ability resolves. In either case, if the source is no longer in the zone that it's expected to be in at the time its last known information is used, and the source can still perform the action even though it no longer exists. So we talked about that. We talked about like how that affects things. So let's give ourselves a kind of a concrete example, right? So we're going to change to Bloodshot Cyclops, which is another kind of similar kind of card for reasons that will become obvious. So
Beautiful,
first question,
beautiful bulk rare.
First question
Bloodshot
is
Cyclops.
we noticed that this card was made before the text would have said sacrifice another creature, which is what it would probably say if we were going to print this card today. So let's say we Bloodshot Cyclops sacrificing itself. What is the result of that happening?
So when we go to resolve this ability, we're going to see that it tells us that Bloodshot Cyclops is going to deal damage equal to the sacrifice creature's power to target creature or player.
Okay.
Now, in our minds, we might pop up and say, well, how can Bloodshot Cyclops deal damage to something if it's no longer on the battlefield? That doesn't make any sense.
That rule I said says you can. That's
so
fine.
Conveniently, that rule tells us that we can. So what we have to do is look at Bloodshot Cyclops. It's no longer on the battlefield, but because it's no longer on the battlefield, we have to use that last known information.
Right.
So as it existed on the battlefield, which I'm going to assume it was, we'll say Doombladed to be removed. Its power would still be...
Well, no, you sacrificed it.
Duh. We activated it. We sacrificed it. So because we sacrificed it, nothing affected its power and toughness. It was still a 4/4 as it last existed on the battlefield. So it will deal damage equal to that 4 power.
Yep.
Because that's what it was.
So yeah. So starting out on like kind of easy mode, you guys probably playing along at home probably saw that before or something similar to it, and so no problem. Now we'll up the ante a little bit. We'll use this next card here. It's called Living Inferno, right? So we're gonna tap the Living Inferno, and it is going to deal damage equal to its power, divided as we choose among any number of target creatures. So for our purposes, we'll say like we've got 8 1/1s that we wanted to kill. So we'll tap the Living Inferno and we'll deal 8 damage to the 1/1s, 1 to each of them, and each of those creatures deals damage equal to its power to Living Inferno. So then it comes back. So Dalton does not want his 8 1/1s to die, so he is going to dismember the Living Inferno. That gives it -5/-5.
Yep.
And then Living Inferno is going to die, right? So what is going to happen?
So I want to point out something really cool. And I don't know if John Avon did this on purpose or not.
Probably did.
But conveniently, there are 8 little laser beams shooting out of Living Inferno.
Yep.
So I'm going to imagine that each one of them is targeting one of these 1/1s.
Yep.
Thank goodness for magic art. So, Living Inferno stumped me when I first heard it. Because the rules tell us that if something is no longer on the battlefield, then we use that last known information. As Living Inferno existed on the battlefield, it was a 3/0.
Yes.
It was dismembered, so before state-based actions were checked, it was a 3/0 and thus went to the graveyard. So that rule would tell us that, okay, we have 3 power, that's how it was on the battlefield, so we'll use that. And then we run into an issue, and that's that we have 8 targets.
Yeah.
Now,
which one of them is supposed to stay around, and which ones aren't?
And so it's not like when we targeted this, I was like, okay, well, this is going to be the first one, and this is going to be the second one, and all the way through, which conveniently, it's not going to matter anyways.
Yep.
So that made me really question what the rules were trying to get at. So specifically, the Comprehensive rules mentions that.
This is the relevant part here.
Yes, so in these cases, any activated or triggered abilities that reference information about the source, because the effect needs to be divided, checks that information when the ability is put onto the stack.
Yeah.
So because the ability of Living Inferno divides the damage as you choose, it will not look at how it last existed and will look at how it went onto the battlefield, because that could affect the number of targets you choose.
Yeah, so you all remember from our casting a spell video, anything that has you choose a division, that is part of the process of casting a spell, or in this case, activating an ability. So that division is going to be locked in at the time when you activate the Living Inferno's ability. And with that being the case, there is no change in that, even if you dismember. The last known information is still used to determine what power it is. If it somehow had left the battlefield in between the process of you activating the ability and when you actually come to the point in activating the ability when you choose what the division is. I'm not, I'm sure there is a way to do that, but
it would
not one that
really
I came
fun.
up with easily. So, but yeah, that's what that line there in that rule refers to. That's what type of situation that is used in.
Does it seem corner case? Yeah.
Well, that's the comprehensive rules, right?
But that's
It's
what the
not
comp rules are for.
Most of the time, it's okay rules. It's the comprehensive rule.
Exactly.
So okay, the next time in the CR where it refers to last known information is an object that looks for a spell or ability that targets something, checks the current state of that spell or ability's targets. If an object it targets is still in the zone that it's expected to be in, or if a player it targets is still in the game, that target's current information is used, even if it's not currently legal. But if an object it targets is no longer in the zone, or the player is no longer in the game, then that target is ignored and its last known information is not used. So here's the example that we came up with for this one here. So let's say I'm going to play this card, Electrolyze.
Sure.
Yeah, now we're going to play the Electrolyze. I'm going to deal 1 damage to Dalton and 1 damage to some creature that Dalton controls. Okay? So that's what we're going to do. Now Dalton is not really excited about that. So he's going to intervene. And the intervene counters target spell that targets a creature. Okay?
Sure. Nice and simple.
Yeah. So I still want to draw a card, and I still want to deal 1 damage to Dalton. So can I destroy Dalton's creature that I'm targeting with Electrolyze in response to intervene in order to still get the other effects of Electrolyze? What do you think?
Well, I am going to tell you that you could certainly destroy my creature in response.
Yes.
If you want.
Yeah.
So what we look at here is that Electrolyze has us choose up to 2 things to target.
Yep.
So because we are putting 1 to a creature and 1 to a player, if one of those targets were to become illegal and the other one is still legal, then we would want that ability to resolve. We would want to do as much as we can with that.
Yep.
So let's assume that David destroys my creature in response.
Yep.
So when intervene goes to resolve, so we've resolved the destruction, now we're at intervene, and Electrolyze is down here. Intervene is going to look to see if it has a legal target.
Okay.
Intervene counters a target spell that targets a creature.
So let's refer back to the CR here for the rule, because this is where it's going to come up.
Yep. So
intervene is an object that looks for a spell or ability that targets something. In this case, it's a spell that targets a creature. So it checks the current state of Electrolyze's targets.
Yep. So in this case, current is going to mean as it currently exists in the game, not only as it was cast.
So yeah, when intervene tries to resolve, it notices that Electrolyze is targeting Dalton still, but it isn't targeting a creature anymore.
Yep.
And this rule says that creature's last known information is not used. And so that would also be the same as if it were, for example, a counter target spell that targets a red creature, or that targets a creature you control. Any qualifiers on that, the game can't look back in time to see, it was targeting one at one point.
And so with that being the case, Dave's savvy rules play of destroying Dalton's creature actually does do the intended result, where the intervene is no longer able to counter Electrolyze, because Electrolyze is no longer a spell that targets a creature.
Yep, and for you fans of Standard out there, to date this episode, this is the same rule that affects the Siren Storm Tamer expansion explosion question. So, in the same vein, Siren Storm Tamer is an annoying little pirate wizard that can counter-target spell or ability that targets you or a creature you control.
Yeah.
So the question that comes up is if someone casts Explosion, which deals X damage to target creature or player, target player draws X cards, casts it targeting Siren Storm Tamer to deal damage, and then a player to draw cards. The other player could activate Siren Storm Tamer to counter the spell, but when that ability goes to resolve, the explosion no longer has a legal creature target for the first one. So Siren Storm Tamer's ability is checked and says, well, this doesn't target me or a creature I control.
Yeah.
And thus is removed from the stack.
Yep. So you are not able to counter the expansion explosion with the Siren Storm Tamer if they play it that way. So okay, that was actually really interesting. I was really excited. But this next one, I've got to tell you, man, like, boy. Sometimes I come up with examples and I know that they're going to be great, right? Like, we already know that it's going to be an exciting one.
Yes.
And so this next one was not. Unlike spells or other kinds of abilities, static abilities can't use an object's last known information for purposes of determining how their effects are applied. I'm not certain. I couldn't come up with any even remotely plausible cases where this rule could come into play. If you have a good example question for this, be sure to email it or send it out to us somehow. I would love to be in possession of such a question. So for now, I guess we'll move on to the next one after that. What? I mean, like, they can all be...
I'm laughing because I, too, cannot think of
I mean, like, coming up with good rules questions is actually surprisingly difficult. So don't,
I'm not even trying to come up with a rules question. I'm just trying to think of how it's a relevant...
Yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Text in the CR.
Yeah, I'm sure that, like, someone could come up with a good one for us, but I would love to see it. I would love to see those. So send them in if you've got them. So, okay, here's our next question. We'll say the question first before we say the rule. We'll see how people like that.
Okay.
This is Ether Adept. So when Ether Adept enters the battlefield, return target creature to its owner's hand. Okay.
Cool.
So I'm gonna play the Ether Adept, and I'm going to have the Ether Adept. When it comes into the battlefield, I'm gonna target your White Knight.
Okay.
With that ability. Okay. So pro black.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you presumably don't want your White Knight to be returned to your hand. So you have this really specific card that comes up in a lot of formats, a lot of constructed and or limited formats for that matter. Which is Deathlace. So you have the Deathlace to make my Ether Adept into a black card, which of course the White Knight has protection from black. When my Ether Adept ability goes to resolve, what will happen?
What set is this even from?
Vintage. This is from my vintage deck, and also Dalton's vintage deck.
That's a format, not a set.
Yeah. No, I mean, like, it's a vintage deck.
Okay.
What set was this? The deck was from? This is like revised, I believe. Or something like that. They were back in the oldie days of Magic. Back when they had like balanced cycles.
Yes.
They had one for every color, by the way, and then they also had Moonlace, which makes them colorless. They continued that one in the later sets in Kamigawa Black, I believe.
It's just great to think of a time in Magic where you were like, this is a spell I would play in my deck.
I don't think there was ever a time. Oh, it was in Time Spiral is when they had
Moonlace.
Yeah.
Ooh.
But yeah, so what do you think? We played the Ether Vial, or we played the Ether Adept.
Back to the question that I detracted
Ether
from.
Adept is going to return the White Knight. You respond to the when Ether Adept enters the battlefield ability by making Ether Adept into a black creature. What happens?
Yeah. So if you wouldn't mind pulling up our relevant text here. So obviously the issue that comes up is we have an ability that is going to be targeting a creature that is coming from a source that it would then have protection from. So it was legal at the time we put it on the stack.
Sure was.
Presumably. And then would become illegal as our ability is going to resolve. So the comprehensive rules that we're looking at tell us that if a spell or ability targets, it checks whether the targets are still legal when it specifies a target. So
when the ability goes to resolve.
Yes, when it goes to resolve. So a target that is... so other changes to the game state may cause a target to no longer be legal, such as, its characteristics changing, maybe by, I don't know, becoming black.
Yeah.
So, thank you, Deathlace. If the source of the ability has left the zone it was in, the last known information is used. If all its targets are now illegal,
we can stop
it
reading
resolve.
here because this is the part.
Yeah.
We already passed the point where it says the answer.
Yeah.
So obviously, if the Ether Adept is still in play, the answer is no go, right? Because it's Ether Adept is a black permanent, and pro black means you can't be the target of black spells or abilities. So okay, so that's fine. If the Ether Adept leaves the battlefield sometime before that ability resolves, like we sacrifice it or we shock it in response or do something like that, that's where this rule comes into play. What?
These rules are intense. I completely read past the relevant portion.
It says the part where it says last known information is
know.
highlighted. We control F for it.
Literally the words last known, yes, but. So the way that these are written in the CR...
Also, by the way, there's an entire additional paragraph. We only made it halfway through this rule.
And this one has 2 examples for
there's
this rule.
Example questions. Oh,
it is
great.
so dense
really
that I read past it without even registering that this is the information I needed.
Yeah, this actually reminds me. The topics in number theory book that I got actually was given to me by a math professor. So thanks. If you're watching this, Dr. Kim, thank you very much. It was very informative. Another really great math professor that I had the year before that, though, told me something that was kind of very fitting. So Professor McClure, he had mentioned that. When you're reading math text, and especially this one here is especially like that. Oh my goodness! Every word counts, and it's extraordinarily dense. If you're reading a math textbook or any kind of a math paper or something like that, the CR is exactly the same way. So it's kind of I don't know if you've ever read a Wikipedia article about some math topic that you don't already know about. It's completely worthless for learning it. You cannot learn it at all. You need someone else to explain the stuff to you, unless you're a superhuman who's really good at it. And the CR is kind of the same way.
Yeah, I have a judge candidate who asked me. They said, "Hey, I'm interested in testing for my L1 soon. Do you recommend reading anything in the CR?"
No,
I was
no. You get people who are really weird and they like reading the CR. You get people like that to do that job for you, and then they explain it to you in language that a normal person could understand, which hopefully is what we're doing right now.
Such as on blogs.magicjudges.org/FTW.
Yeah, absolutely.
Shameless plug.
Absolutely. We do have some questions from the chat here that we're going to get to soon. I promise we're not ignoring you. This question is actually one of the ones that we came up with in preparation for this episode. Actually, I think it's our next one, right?
Yeah, that's one I got.
So we're gonna quickly go through this here and then the rest of it, because there is a part 2 to this question too. So briefly going through, even if the Ether Adept leaves the battlefield before its ability resolves, the rule that we just said says that the last known information is used to determine its characteristics when we try to see if it's a legal target. And so when the spell or ability is trying to resolve, the game checks to see if the targets are legal still. And in this case, Ether Adept, when it last existed on the battlefield, was a black permanent, which means that pro-black creatures such as White Knight are not able to be targeted. So this is an illegal target, and it will not be returned to its owner's hand. So, okay, that was the easy part, right? Hopefully nobody had any real problems or questions about that one, because that's pretty straightforward. If you took that to a judge candidate who's certified for level 1, or who was thinking that he was ready to test for level 1,
I would expect that person to be able to get that question right, because that's like, this is how protection works, this is how resolving spells works. Pretty standard.
Yeah.
Now this one I would not expect them to get right. This next one here. So this is part 2 of this question, and Dalton actually did not get this one right. I didn't get this one right.
I would like to think I'm a competent judge.
Right, like when I went through and I was writing this question, I was like, wait a sec, is this how this works? And I had to like read the CR like 2 or 3 times. I had to read the exact text of everything. I'm pretty confident that I got this one correctly. So we're gonna go through. This is a card that's very similar to Ether Adept. It's very similar. It's called Sidisi's Faithful. Okay, and the abilities are pretty similar. So we're gonna play the Sidisi's Faithful, and then the exploit ability that lets you sacrifice a creature is gonna go on the stack, right? Now Dalton is gonna respond to that ability by death lacing the Sidisi's Faithful.
Great.
Now I am going to sacrifice the Sidisi's Faithful. And then we're gonna try and return the White Knight to its owner's hand. Can we do that?
Great. So let's break this down.
Yeah.
Including what we just learned.
Yeah.
So this looks very similar. We have a creature that when it exploits a creature, it has the same effect: return target creature to its owner's hand.
Yep.
Great. So that checks that bubble of we've covered this. We are giving Sidisi's Faithful a new color. It is going to become black. Cool. Okay. Check that box. Same basic setup.
Yep.
But now our Sidisi's Faithful is going to leave the battlefield.
Yes.
So what we said earlier is, we're going to use the information about Sidisi's Faithful. Let's try using that last known information.
Oh, wait. Because here's what makes this one different from the previous one. There's actually 2 abilities, right? There's the exploit ability, and then there's the return a creature ability, right? So there's 2.
Yes.
So when the first one resolves, the exploit ability makes me sacrifice Sidisi's Faithful. And once I sacrifice it, it's not black anymore. It goes back to being blue.
Yep.
So when Sidisi's Faithful exploits a creature, return target creature to its owner's hand, that ability is going to trigger, and it's not going to be triggering from a black permanent. It's going to be triggering for a blue permanent. So when we put that triggered ability on the stack, we should be able to return the White Knight.
Yeah.
So that's what the difference is. The difference is because when we resolve the ability, it's going to be after the triggered ability that makes you sacrifice it, puts it in the graveyard. So therefore, it won't be black anymore. So this is kind of an interesting one. Really exciting, and I had to like read through a few times because it's kind of interesting. It changes in a subtle way, and that was something that was very pleasing to me. So any questions about that one from the chat before we go? So wait. Not legal target since Sidisi's Faithful is black. But if you exploited a different creature, yes. So yeah, if you exploit a second creature with Sidisi's Faithful, then Sidisi's Faithful will still be on the battlefield, and you won't be able to target a White Knight with it because Sidisi's Faithful will still be on the battlefield, and it'll be black, and pro black means you can't do that. So that's pretty good.
However, the important part is that Sidisi's Faithful leaves the battlefield, and thus loses that color characteristic.
Yeah. So, okay,
which is crazy.
Great question. If there's anything else from the chat, be sure to let us know. Ooh, what's our next one? Ooh, wow, yeah. Okay, so our next one is another question that was specifically requested by the chat. So let's have a look at this card, and this card is something you might be familiar with.
May have heard of it.
Yeah, Scrap Trawler. It used to be playable, but now it isn't playable anymore. The Scrap Trawler button is right by the Ether Vial button, for those of you.
It's literally got like its own hotkey,
or
what are the phone numbers? Speed dial.
Oh, yes.
It's got the OBS push speed dial. It's great.
It's right next to the push to OBS button. So this is Ether Vial. So like if we're gonna like have the Ether Vial and we tap to put a creature card into play, right? So let's say that we activate the Ether Vial and it has 2 counters on it, right? 2 counters. Now I don't want Dalton to put any 2-mana creatures into play, so I'm gonna throw a monkey wrench in his, and we're gonna steady progress in response to that. Right? So I'm gonna proliferate to give Ether Vial an additional charge counter, so that when the ability resolves, it'll have 3 charge counters on it, right?
Yeah.
So
what kind of creature can Dalton put into play?
So, Ether Vial, if you wouldn't mind, the ability reads, you may put a creature card with converted mana cost equal to the number of charge counters on Ether Vial from your hand onto the battlefield.
Yeah.
So as this ability goes to resolve, that is when we are going to check to see how many charge counters are on Ether Vial.
Right.
So as this goes to resolve, David, I'm going to assume proliferates and adds a counter, which would put us up to 3.
Yep.
And it is at that point we are going to check and see, hey, you can put something with charge counters equal to 3 on the battlefield.
All right.
Unfortunately, Ether Vial is not X or less.
Oh gosh, can you imagine?
So
dumb.
Yeah. Assuming that all of my creatures in hand are like Thalia, Guardian of Thraben,
it'd be like
Leonin
insane.
Arbiter,
It'd be like
Gaddock
so good.
Teague. 3 is not a great number.
Yeah, it's not as good. And like even so, like when Dalton activated it, he was planning on putting a 2 in. So like me changing his plan might be beneficial. Okay, so same question, but like I don't have steady progress because that card doesn't see like a ton of play in Modern. Maybe we have this other card. Maybe we have this disenchant, right?
Sure.
So we're going to destroy target artifact with the disenchant.
Yeah.
So Dalton had two charge counters on the Ether Vial. Then we disenchant it. What type of creature can Dalton put into play if we disenchant in response to the ability?
Yeah, so we approach our friend,
The CR.
last known information.
Yeah.
Oh,
No,
CR.
We
that
approach
works too.
Yeah, we got to read. So this is the relevant rule in this case where last known information comes into play. If an effect requires information from the game, such as in this case the number of counters on Ether Vial, that answer is determined only once when the effect is applied. So when the Ether Vial ability resolves, that's when we count. So if the effect requires information from a specific object, including the source of the ability itself, the effect uses the current information of that object if it's in a public zone that it was expected to be in. So in this case, the first example, we still have access to Ether Vial in the public zone that it was supposed to be in the battlefield. And with that being the case, we can just count how many there is when the ability resolves, which is 3. And so if it is no longer in the zone that it's supposed to be in, or if the effect has moved it into a hidden zone, then the last known information is used. And so that's the case with part 2 of this question with the disenchant. If we disenchant the Ether Vial, then we use the last known information. And so that is the reason why you get the 2 drop with the disenchant. So unfortunately you don't get a 0 drop because like obviously when it's in the graveyard there's 0 counters on it.
Yep.
So that's kind of interesting.
A little bit of next level tech. David goes to steady progress, and I disenchant in response.
Yeah, then,
Get him.
Then I would be really disappointed that he 2-for-1'd himself to be able to put that 2/2 into play. I probably would because like if you're going to make a play like that, it's probably going to be a pretty real.
Oh yeah, the number of so I play like a Burning Tremissary, Reckless Bushwhacker style deck in Modern. The number of times I have ghost quartered my own land to get another colored mana I need.
Oh yeah, something like that.
If I am doing that, I am ending the game. I don't know if I'm going to win or lose, but that choice is
Maybe
causing me
not.
to end the game.
Yeah, maybe not. All right, so the next one is actually the newest addition in the last known information. Can you guess what it is? Okay, I probably spoiled it. Like, you're not allowed to look at the example card that I just pushed to OBS because that gives it away a little bit. But
Maybe.
yeah, okay, so the example card that I maybe with all you guys being able to see, you can guess what it is too. So here's the Merfolk Branchwalker. So it explores, right? Now this is actually really interesting because if you change controller of the card, then when it explores, then a different person gets to like look at their top card of their library. Yeah,
That's cool.
Right? So that's actually really interesting. So the relevant rule here is if a permanent changes zones before an effect causes it to explore, its last known information is used to determine which object explored and who controls it. So an example of this would be, for example, I play Merfolk Branchwalker, right? Now Dalton is going to play an Entwined Grab the Reins and steal my Branchwalker and sacrifice it. Who gets to explore?
Yeah. So thanks to that lovely little tidbit in the CR, I do.
Yeah.
Which is pretty straightforward. The merfolk itself says when it enters the battlefield, it explores.
Yeah.
Which is going to apply that it's, attached to the creature. It's not attached to the player or the caster. So, when it says it explores, it says reveal the top card of your is going to be referring to the controller.
Right. So, okay, pretty straightforward. But yeah, that's just the newest addition to the specific rules here regarding last known information. This is the last known information rule that was most recently added to the CR. So that's kind of cool, right? Okay, then we get into Okay, so this is another one. Let's see here.
I get the benefit of seeing this before you all do, and this one is very oddly specific.
Oh yeah. Okay,
but I love it.
Before we move on, we have a question from the chat. If you were to sudden spoiling in response to explore, right? So with that being the case, sudden spoiling, we'll pull it up.
Please share, because I don't know what it is.
This one was pretty relevant back when it was in standard. Probably less relevant now. The relevant thing is that it causes the Merfolk Branchwalker to lose all its abilities. So in this case, absolutely nothing is going to change about the answer when you sudden spoiling to remove the Explorer. The reason for that, it goes back to the very first one that we talked about, which is that once a spell or ability is put onto the stack, if it's a triggered ability, such as the Explorer, it exists independent of its source. So no matter what happens to Merfolk Branchwalker after that point, the triggered ability is still there, and it still has the text of that triggered ability on the stack. So that means that no matter if Merfolk Branchwalker loses its abilities or goes to another zone or does anything, that ability is still there and it's still going to resolve just like it should. The only thing that's kind of up for grabs in this specific example is who controls it. If I control it when the Explorer ability resolves, then I'm the one who looks at the top card of his library and can put it in the graveyard or what is it? Is it graveyard? Yeah, put it in the graveyard or put it in my hand if it's land. If Dalton controls it, then he's the person who gets to take that action. So that's the only thing that's really up in the air.
I know I've seen this before on Arena a few times where I'll cast a creature with Explorer, and in response my opponent tries to Merfolk Trickster it.
Oh, yeah, it doesn't work.
Doesn't work at all. It's happened to me probably more than a dozen times.
Yeah,
and
this is one of the times where I guess the rules don't work as well as they could.
Or as people want them to.
Yeah, or as people want them to.
Which is also relevant. The rules aren't always designed to...
Because that's what the goal is.
Be what you want.
The goal is for the answer to be what you expect the answer to be.
So not always what you want it to be.
Yeah, unfortunate. So hopefully that answers your question there. Okay, so the next one is kind of an interesting. We'll do the question before we do the reading the rule, because I think that it works pretty well for this specific one. So we have our friend Thornwind Fairies here.
I know the answer.
we have our friend Thornwind Fairies here, and it is equipped by this special equipment here, Basilisk Collar, right?
Ooh.
So the equipped creature has Death Touch and Lifelink. Now we are going to activate the Thornwind Fairies ability.
Yep.
And so targeting a creature, does the creature die? Obviously it does, but that's like the making sure everybody's on the same page here. What if we respond to activating Thornwind Fairy by playing this exciting card, which many of you have probably not heard of, the Eaten by Spiders. So we were going to... This is why we had to have Thornwind Fairy, because it has flying, rather than Prodigal Sorcerer or Prodigal Pyromancer or whatever. This one has flying, so you can legally target it with the Eaten by Spiders. So yeah, what do you think, Dalton?
What is that in the art?
It's something that's getting eaten by some spiders.
Well, yeah, Dalton. It's so cool.
Yeah.
Okay, I want that creature type in the next Innistrad set.
Let's see. This is Avacyn Restored, so it's a demon.
Yeah,
the demon was caught in some spider webs.
I want that in the next one. Anyways, so destroy target creature with flying and all equipment attached to it. Yeah. Cool. So not only are we getting rid of our fairy, but we're also getting rid of Basilisk Collar. Yeah. That seems pretty sweet. Basilisk Collar's annoying. Anyways, so we have a very specific rule in the CR, if you would do me the honors, that says that if an object changes zones before an effect causes it to deal damage, such as, being
What just
destroyed
happened
or
here.
what just happened here, its last known information is used to determine whether it had Death Touch.
Yeah.
And that is verbatim from
that's
the
the
CR. So in this case, we are going to look as this last existed on the battlefield.
Yep.
And that was before Eaten by Spiders destroyed it. At that point, it was still equipped with Basilisk Collar, and therefore still had Death Touch.
Yep.
Which is pretty neat.
So yeah, the creature will be destroyed due to the fact that it had Death Touch, according to last known information. Now, what if we had this other card, this
What's
Blast
fun
Firebolt?
is if you were to just destroy the Basilisk Collar.
Hey, read the card. Read the card. Don't spoil my questions that I came up with here in advance here.
Man, I'm so good.
Yeah.
All right. So Blast Firebolt
Dalton's like making up questions by himself. He's going Maverick.
deals 5 damage to target creature. Destroy all equipment attached to that creature.
Yeah.
So this one's weird.
And by weird, we mean different. The answer is different. Isn't that cool?
Is it?
Yes. Yes.
See, now you're giving stuff away.
Oh, come on, Dalton.
Okay.
You already gave this one away.
So Blast Firebolt does damage to the creature.
Yeah.
But then destroys the equipment.
Uh-huh.
So...
And then state-based actions are going to destroy the creature.
And then state-based actions are going to destroy the creature. But they don't occur simultaneously.
Like they did with Eaten by Spiders.
Like they did with Eaten by Spiders. So Blast Firebolt is going to deal damage. It's going to mark it on our fairy. But as part of resolving Blast Firebolt, that Basilisk Collar is going to be put into the graveyard.
Yep.
So at this point in the game, before we are checking state-based actions, we have a creature that has marked damage on it that will put it into the graveyard.
Yep.
That is unequipped with any sort of equipment.
Yeah.
And then our fairies are going to go into Thornwind, yes. Then Thornwind Fairies is going to be put into the graveyard without lifelink and Death Touch.
Yeah, so as it last existed on the battlefield, it did not have any equipment attached to it, giving it lifelink and Death Touch, and so therefore it does not have lifelink and Death Touch, and the creature will not be taking Death Touch damage.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. That is pretty interesting. Now, I wonder if you can guess what the next instance of the phrase last known information is in the CR.
Chat. Looking at you.
Go ahead, Dalton.
Because I don't know.
Okay, equipped creature has Death Touch and Lifelink. Now the previous one said
Check if it has
if an object, So this one said if an object changes zones before an effect causes it to deal damage, the last known information is used to determine whether it had Death Touch. The next one is a very similar rule that has the exact same text, except it has Lifelink. So the last known information is used to determine whether it had Lifelink. So in both those cases, if it was Eaten by Spiders, you do gain the 1 life. If it was Blast Fire Bolted, you do not gain the 1 life. And it's for the same reason as discussed previously. The same exact rule, but with 1 word different. So, okay, that's kind of... I wonder, Dalton, if you know what the next instance is in the CR of those.
Is it another ability one?
Yeah, so here you go. If the next one is the exact same rule, like copy.
I was going to say either Wither, Poison, or
Infect is the next one. Yeah, Infect is the next one. So there's 4 different. So this is probably what the reason was why like me and Dalton had different counts, right? Because like I was counting these as like 4 separate ones because it specifically says it in 4 different rules, but like obviously it's like the same thing. So like all these questions just like copy and paste. Imagine me and Dalton saying like the exact same thing, but like referring to a different card. So nothing too like interesting to say about that stuff there. So Wither, Infect. Okay, so the next one. Okay, this is actually another really good one. So this one here is okay. So. And this comes up. This is a real actual rule that actually really comes up in real actual games of Magic.
Oh my goodness, we're gonna get to a question that matters.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like the Eaten by Spiders one mattered too.
Yes,
sort of. It mattered to somebody.
It'll matter in a Commander game somewhere.
It mattered to me. I wrote it. I wrote the question. So okay,
real card.
Yeah, this is a real card. Really sees play in real modern games, right? Like you see it in the stupid, what's it called deck? The double Hardened Scales. Yeah, the Hardened Scales deck.
Hardened Scales Affinity.
So okay, so we have the Arcbound Worker, and the Arcbound Worker is gonna block a Glistener Elf.
Sweet.
What happens?
That just sounds like a rancid matchup that like really explains what modern is.
I mean. whoever gets open shoved on first is probably going to lose. That's probably what happens in that matchup. But yeah, so like Glistener Elf attacks,
Cool.
Archbound Worker blocks, no effects. What happens?
So not only are we looking at last known information, this is a really cool state-based actions question.
Yeah.
And
so some of you are probably like wondering now, like, how does last known information apply to this? And so like there's a couple of times actually.
Yeah, I can think of another one that's really cool. So modular. The question I think you're trying to get at is when the Arcbound Worker dies.
Yeah.
Is it going to have a +1/+1 counter that we can put on another target artifact creature?
Yeah.
So what Infect tells us is that if it's going to deal damage to a creature, you instead put a -1/-1 counter on it.
Yeah.
Arcbound Worker's power is a +1/+1 counter.
Yeah.
So what state-based actions tell us is that these two things, when they come together, are going to cancel each other out.
Yeah.
A creature with a +1/+1 counter and a -1/-1 counter on it, if those exist simultaneously, state-based actions are going to remove them.
Yes.
Great, cool. What we also know is that if a creature is marked with lethal damage, then
Or
state-based
has
action,
0 toughness.
or has 0 toughness,
Which is what actually is happening in this case.
which is what is going to happen in this case. Those two things are going to send that creature to the graveyard, because dead. When are state-based actions checked? When are all, 22 of them checked?
Yeah, something like that.
Simultaneously.
Yeah.
So what happens is we have an Arcbound Worker that has a +1/+1 counter on it, a -1/-1 counter on it, that is being checked at the same time that a creature with 0 toughness is going to be put into the graveyard.
Isn't that cool? Isn't that really cool, guys?
So what this means is before our state-based actions are going to check the -1/-1 +1/+1 counter and remove them from each other, it is going to be put into the graveyard with both of those counters on it simultaneously.
Yeah.
So if there is another artifact creature out on the battlefield, then you will be able to move that counter from Arcbound to the other thing.
Yep.
Which is sweet.
Yeah. So like summarizing here, in this case, we have two state-based actions that want to apply, and they both apply at the same time. The relevant rule is if a state-based action results in a permanent leaving the battlefield at the same time as other state-based actions were performed, the permanent's last known information is derived from the game state before any of those state-based actions were performed. So in this case, both of those two state-based actions, removing the +1/+1 counter and -1/-1 counter, as well as putting the Arcbound Worker into the graveyard for having 0 toughness, both of those are happening at the same time. And so the last known information is derived from the game state immediately before any of those state-based actions were performed. So at the time, it had a +1/+1 counter on it. So that's good. The other time when this came up, they actually, I think this is the next most recent one after the Explore one. So the one where this came up was a little bit more bland type of a...
Way before.
Well, like this is what like card it came up with for.
And by way before, I mean not in
It was
standard
in
in the
Eldritch
past.
It was in Eldritch Moon.
2 years?
Yeah. So like Undying. Actually, I think that this might be after the Infect one, because I think they had to fix this one in Shadowmoor, because this one, because they fixed this one at the same time as they added Wither. I remember now.
Okay.
I remember now. So yeah, like if you have a young wolf and the young wolf goes to the graveyard because you played something that gave it a -1/-1 counter on it, or like 2 -1/-1 counters, and it did have a +1/+1 counter on it, does the young wolf persist? Or Undying. Does the Undying happen? So yeah, it's like that same type of thing. Like if you had like the Kitchen Finks with the +1/+1 counter on it, and then actually I don't know if the +1/+1s. Yeah. This is actually the most recent one, because when they changed, they changed the +1/+1 and -1/-1 counters annihilating each other after they did Undying, or after they did Persist, but before they did Undying. So yeah, there we go. But anyway, so this is the question that like the CR has as the example question for it. Obviously it's the same thing. The young wolf, when it died, it had +1/+1 counters and -1/-1 counters on it. And then the two state-based actions happened at the same time. And so the Undying looks to immediately before any of those state-based actions happened, so it did have +1/+1 counters, so it stays dead.
Another relevant modern card is Hangerback Walker.
Okay, that's a like relevant one too. Not for this rule.
It's in the affinity one.
Oh, wait.
And this is totally relevant.
What?
Not to
yeah,
Undying,
yeah.
but...
Yeah, not
Paperback
to
Walker.
Undying, but for like determining how many
Yes.
plus one
If you were
should
to
be
give
converted
it,
to
say it
the-
has 5 +1/+1 counters, and you were to put 5 -1/-1 counters on it,
Right.
you still get your 5 Thopters, which is pretty sweet.
Yeah. Yep.
Cool. So we did that one. We got it. Awesome. And there was a question in the chat about a Great Merchant of Asphodel.
Wait. There's one more, I believe. Actually, no, wait, there isn't. This is the last one. Oh yeah. Okay, so there's one more that only has to do with multiplayer formats.
Yeah.
So for completeness, we'll throw this out there. If an effect requires information about a specific player, the effect uses the current information about that player if they're still in the game. Otherwise, the effect uses the last known information about that player before they left the game. So let's say, for example, that I control a Grey Merchant of Asphodel.
Look at that chat, bringing it up right on time.
Hopefully I spelled all these words right. Okay.
Ooh, look at you!
I was actually like Grey and Asphodel like could be spelled a lot of different ways. You know what you think? Like I don't know if they spell the British one. So here. Oh wait. We have another question before we do this question. We'll do the example here. So.
Yes.
When Grey Merchant enters the battlefield, each opponent loses X life, where X is your devotion to black, and you gain that much life. So let's say I play the Grey Merchant of Asphodel, and it's a 3-player game for simplicity.
Sure.
So then both of my opponents decide that that's not cool, and they want to kill me. So they play a bunch of instant speed burn spells and kill me. Right? The ability's still on the stack. The ability's still going to resolve. What is my devotion? Oh wait, do I lose? No. I don't know how the multiplayer formats work. I actually can't come up with this question immediately because
if you were removed from
all
the
my
game,
stuff gets removed from the game.
you would not.
So someone would have to like play a spell that like asked for information about me, and then I would
something like change lives with.
Yeah. I'm not sure. Someone can come up with an example. Like I say, the multiplayer stuff isn't really like stuff that I spend a lot of time studying because it's not stuff that can come up in Comprel anyway. But anyway, that's the last one. That's the rule. So we'll talk about the Grey Merchant question afterwards, but we'll also talk about this. So who wins between Arcbound Hybrid, which is a creature that has Modular 2, and Grim Affliction? So we'll pull the Grim Affliction up.
Some Grim Affliction.
It has Proliferate. This one was a really good removal spell back in that standard format, or back in that limited format, I suppose.
Cool.
So here's the Grim Affliction. So you put a -1/-1 counter on target creature, then Proliferate. So what's going to happen is, we have a Modular 2 creature, and we're going to proliferate the counter on there. So the play is going to be the following. I have a Modular 2 creature. Dalton is going to Grim Affliction it and put a -1/-1 counter on it, and then he's obviously going to proliferate the -1/-1 counter.
Yep.
So at that point, what's going to happen is there's going to be 2 state-based actions, just like before, and one of them is going to want to put the Arcbound Hybrid into the graveyard because it has 0 toughness. One of them is going to want to take 2 +1/+1 and -1/-1 counters off of the hybrid. Now that happens in one action, so all of the pairs of +1 and -1 counters that are on the creature at the same time get removed in one block. The actual text of the rule makes that clear. If a permanent has both a +1/+1 counter and a -1/-1 counter on it, n +1/+1 and n -1/-1 counters are removed from it, where n is the smaller of the number of +1 and -1 counters. So the state-based action is going to remove all those counters in one effect, one action. And so as a result, we look at how many +1/+1 counters I had before any state-based actions were performed, and that would be 2. So you would get 2 counters getting put on your thing.
Yep. Even though the steps of the card occur one after the other, we're putting a counter on and then we're proliferating. We're not checking any state-based actions while the spell is resolving.
Correct.
So it's not like one goes on and then cancels out and then we have to proliferate. So Grim Affliction would work exactly the same as if we just put 2 on at the same time. So back to Gary.
All right, so we gotta pull our old friend back up here. So here he is. So okay, now a question where last known information really does matter. Not really for Grey Merchant, and so here's why. So let's take a look at exactly what's happening in this ability. So when it enters the battlefield, each opponent loses X life, where X is your devotion to black, and you gain that many total life. So, with that being the case, let's say we remove Grey Merchant of Asphodel in response to this ability. The devotion, like we had in, I believe it was the first example of rules that have last known information in them, it counts how much your devotion is when that ability resolves. I think that was probably the third rule, maybe now. But in any case, that's how it works.
Yes.
When the ability resolves, that's when you check what your devotion is. And so there's no last known information at all, because your devotion is a characteristic of me, the player. So that means that when we count that up, maybe the 2 from Grey Merchant of Asphodel is going to be part of that, maybe it isn't, but in any case, it gets counted when that ability resolves, and the losing life and gaining life happens based on that number when this Grey Merchant ability resolves.
And as we mentioned earlier, once the ability triggers, it does exist separate from Grey Merchant, so removing the creature will not remove the ability from the stack.
Oh yeah, I wish that were how it worked back in that standard format. Oh my goodness.
That would be a...
Well, that would make this card a lot worse, let's put it that way.
Yes, it would.
You would not be
it certainly would.
Not be gaining 1 million life or whatever off of that. So hopefully that answered your question for the person who put that one in the chat. We had some,
you've been great.
We had some other interesting
Mongoose
questions too, didn't we, Dalton? That you had come up with, right?
Yeah. So this is one that occurred to me, and I got a judge call at, I believe this was SCG Milwaukee 2 years ago, maybe last year early. And I answered it, and in the process of it, I gave a player outside assistance.
Oh yeah, I remember talking about this.
Yeah, so...
But let's talk about the actual... Let's talk about the...
So,
it refers to
the situation here, player casts Champion of Wits as a 2/1. So it's entering the battlefield. They say, trigger, acknowledge the fact that they're going to draw cards equal to the power, and then discard 2 cards. Opponent goes, okay, in response, we are going to cast Moment of Craving. Give the creature -2 until end of turn, gain 2 life. So then the player, their question to me was, well, do I still draw cards? And...
Interesting question.
It was a very interesting question.
So, putting aside any outside assistance aspects of it, what will happen when this tries to resolve? Well, let's take a look. We're going to draw cards equal to its power. Now, as it last existed on the battlefield, its power was 0. So we'll draw 0 cards, and if we do...
Yes, so it is a May ability, which is where I might have went wrong.
Yeah. So if we decide to draw 0 cards, if we decide to take advantage of this opportunity to draw 0 cards, we will also have to discard 2 cards, which probably means that you're going to decide not to draw the 0 cards and therefore not have to discard anything.
So the reason there was a call from this player is that they were curious, because they said trigger, did that mean they were choosing to draw cards?
That's a very interesting point, because it used to be that the answer would be yes, that they would be kind of locked into that in some sense, but then there was this card.
So they didn't understand how the May worked. They were curious of, by acknowledging the trigger, do I have to choose yes? But then we got this weird hippo elephant thing.
He's mimicking. He's a shapeshifter. I don't know why they didn't give it the shapeshifter ability, because that should be a shapeshifter creature in my opinion. But yeah, so when this card got printed, the same sort of question would come up. I play the Reality Smasher, and then my opponent's like, trigger with Eldrazi Mimic. And then they dismember my Reality Smasher, and then they don't say anything else, and so I'm like, judge, he said trigger, and let's use the trigger to destroy his Eldrazi Mimic, which is now a 0/0, because he chose to make his power and toughness equal to that creature's power and toughness. Again, the last known information is used to determine what that creature's power and toughness are when this triggered ability from Eldrazi Mimic resolves. So that's sort of the same type of a question there. What about this? Ooh. I actually haven't seen this card
and so
in quite some time.
The last thing, I believe it's the last thing we're going to talk about.
Oh, we got a couple more.
Oh, we do? Cool.
Yeah.
So one of them that came up with this was fighting.
Yeah.
Fighting, seems like it is very straightforward. When it enters the battlefield, you may have it fight target creature you don't control. Cool.
Okay.
Great.
No problem.
So what we've learned is that if something enters the battlefield, you can use its last known information, or if it were to be removed or change zones, then we can use its last known information to determine how much power it's going to do.
Yeah.
Right?
And it can even though the creature left the battlefield, it's still able to do damage, which is what like the Thornwind Fairy did, and the other
Pyromancer,
and so like that's kind of makes it seem like if I were to play the Foe Rager Regent and have it fight one of Dalton's creatures, and then Dalton destroyed it in response, then it seems like Dalton's creature would still take damage equal to my Foe Rager Regent's power.
Yeah. So one of the things that David and I have mentioned before, and this is a great time to mention again, is
read the CR.
Just because things seem similar does not mean they are the same. So fight is a specific ability, word that instructs two creatures or to deal damage equal to their power to the other.
Yep.
However, one of the specifics of fight is that if a creature instructed to fight is no longer on the battlefield or is no longer a creature, then no damage is dealt. By either creature. So neither creature can deal damage equal to its power to the other, regardless of which one leaves or becomes an illegal target.
Yep.
So because of that, even though they sound like they'd be the same, it means that it doesn't work out maybe how one of us wants to.
Yeah, and also the same is true with things that make it an illegal target. So if I gave my creature protection from green, then not only would Dawn's creature not be able to deal damage to my creature, but my creature would also not be able to do any damage to his creature. So it's a very fair ability fight.
Yes,
maybe not as fair as what we would want.
The Gruul are nothing if not fair.
I suppose that's kind of true.
I mean, yeah, I'd say so. You each get in the ring, and it doesn't matter how strong or powerful you are. It's just two things duking it out.
All right, so
seems fair.
There was one more that I wanted to talk about. Wait, was there any more on our list here?
I believe.
Wait, there was one more.
Yes. So one of the other things that came up, and we may have actually mentioned this in a previous episode.
One. Yeah.
So Resilient Kenra is sweet. When it enters the battlefield, it gives a creature +X until end of turn, where X is its power.
Yep.
So me being a real whiz here, I'm going to cast my Resilient Kenra.
Yep.
And give my Grizzly Bear +2/+2 until end of turn, because that's what Resilient Kenra's power is.
Sure.
Well, David doesn't want to deal with a 4/4 Grizzly Bear.
No.
So what he's going to do, being a very smart Magic player, he's going to 2-for-1 me. David is going to cast Dismember on Resilient Kenra. And so as it last existed on the battlefield, it was a -3/-3.
Yep.
Ouch.
That hurts.
So not only
hurts
do I
down real
lose my
bad,
Kenra,
right?
but now my Grizzly Bear gets -3/-3. Fortunately, it's no longer how the rules
work. That's how it used
work.
to work, but they changed it. This is the relevant rule in this case. Most of the time, Magic only uses positive numbers and 0. You can't choose a negative number, deal negative damage, gain negative life, and so on. However, it is possible for a game value, such as a creature's power, to be less than 0. So that's why the Resilient Kenra last known information would say that its power and toughness was -3/-3. So this is the relevant part, and they changed this just recently in the last year or so. If a calculation or comparison needs to use a negative number, it does so, but if a calculation that would determine the result of an effect yields a negative number, 0 is used instead, unless that effect doubles or sets a specific value to a player's life total or a creature's power or toughness. So because this effect does not double or set a specific value to Grizzly Bear's power and toughness, 0 is used instead of -3 when that calculation is performed.
And specifically with that, double refers to a card that says double. If it gives it +X, where X is its
Happens
power,
to be 2,
then that even though mathematically it's doubling, it is not by
It's
the
not
rule of
actually
doubling.
using the word doubling in its magic.
Jackal Wizard? Okay, cool. I'll take it.
Yeah.
Resilient Kenner, Jackal Wizard.
All right. Now here's another one. This is my last one. That one there was Dalton's last one. This is my last one.
Yes.
So okay, we have the Fall of the Hammer, and we're gonna use Fall of the Hammer to make my creature, my grizzly bear, deal damage equal to its power to another target creature. So like
Cool.
Dalton's, random X creature.
Oh, that's an instant too.
Oh yeah.
Wow, that's a good card.
Right. So okay. So we're gonna have my grizzly bear have the basilisk collar on it because that's pretty nice, and then we're going to shock. Okay, we're gonna shock my grizzly bear that has a basilisk collar on it. So I'm gonna deal 3 damage to your like hill giant, say, which is a 3/3.
Yep.
What happens?
So, with this here, our grizzly bear is going to be marked with lethal damage.
Yep.
Great. Cool.
Yep.
So it's going to go to the graveyard.
Yep.
As it last existed, though, it was a 2/2
With
Death
Touch and
Touch lifelink creature.
Yep.
So what we know is that if a creature was last on the battlefield with Death Touch and lifelink, it'll still have that for an effect that asks about it.
Yep.
Which is great.
Yeah.
So-
yeah. Well, in certain cases.
In certain cases. It might be great for one player and not the other.
Yeah.
But anyways, to follow the hammer, target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to another target creature.
Right.
So looking at this card, we have 2 cases of the word target.
Yeah.
One is grizzly bear and the other is
Hill giant.
hill giant. So we now have an issue.
Yeah.
Our first target is gone.
Grizzly bear is gone.
It's gone.
No more.
Doesn't exist anymore. So Magic's a great game. It's
Yeah.
going to have us do as much as possible
Yep.
because we do still have a legal target,
Yeah.
which is hill giant. However, grizzly bear is not on the battlefield.
Yeah, and that's important in this specific version of the question. Remember how before, even though like the Thornwind Fairy wasn't on the battlefield anymore, it could still deal the damage.
Yeah.
This is a completely different case
Completely.
because it uses targets.
Yeah.
And because Grizzly Bear is not on the battlefield anymore, it is not a legal target for Fall of the Hammer anymore. And because it is not a legal target for Fall of the Hammer, that means Fall of the Hammer cannot make it do anything. And that means that you will not be able to deal the 2 Death Touch lifelink damage to the Hill Giant. If you were going to be able to do that, then it would be fine, and you would have Death Touch and Lifelink, because as Grizzly Bear last existed on the battlefield, it did have those abilities. But because this deals with a target, then you are not able to. So that is the last kind of thing. So like those last 3 cases, I think, is kind of like the special, with the Foe Rager Regent, the fight, with Fall of the Hammer being a targeted spell, and with the Resilient Kenra being a mathematical thing with a specific rule that governs it. Those 3 are kind of like cases where the last known information kind of falls more into a trick kind of a category. But hopefully we've done a good enough job explaining why those specific cases are different, so that when you have a last known information question come up in your own games, you'll be able to confidently answer and be able to detect which of these buckets it's supposed to go under. So that is all the material that we had prepared for everyone today. I hope everyone had an awesome time learning about last known information. I know I certainly did.
Yeah, I this is probably the episode where I have learned the most.
Yeah?
Getting ready for
Awesome.
it.
Oh yeah. So that and me too. Like I actually learned some stuff when I was doing the show notes and the research for it too. So hopefully everyone had a really awesome time. We'll be on for a little bit later if you have any additional questions that you'd like to ask. But until that time, this is Dave Eldon Dalton Grimes signing out. Have a good evening, everybody.